December 23, 1944, 2:36 a.m. Outside Bastogne, Belgium. A farmhouse cellar shakes every time an artillery round lands nearby, dust sifting down like snow. Down there, in the dark, 27 wounded Americans are stacked shoulder to shoulder on straw and shattered doors. Some are quiet. Some are praying. Some are just making that low sound men make when pain is bigger than language. And standing over them is a medic with a ruined left glove and blood crusted on his sleeves. His name is Corporal Henry "Doc" Alvarez. Doc checks his bag for the third time. Bandages, morphine, sulfa, a few needles. And what he does not have is the one thing that decides whether these men live until morning: penicillin. Because in the Ardennes winter, bullets aren't the only killers. Infection is a second enemy, quieter and more patient. Doc looks at his watch. It's been 9 hours since the last resupply. The temperature outside is dropping below freezing. The roads are choked with snow and wrecks. And German patrols are moving through the dark like they own the world again. The safe choice is obvious. Stay in the cellar. Do what you can. Let the chain of command figure it out. But Doc Alvarez has already done the math. By dawn, at least 5 of these men will be dead. Not from their wounds, but from what grows inside them afterward. By tomorrow, it could be 10. And then Doc hears something through the shelling. Not a scream. Not a prayer. An engine. Close. Low. Idling. Doc climbs the cellar steps, pushes the door open a crack, and looks into the snow-lit night. In the yard, half covered by a camouflage tarp, sits a vehicle he has no business seeing this far forward. A German ambulance. Boxy, whitewashed, with a red cross painted large enough to be seen from the sky. It's still warm, still running, and completely unattended. Doc stares at it and feels something click in his brain the way it does when a tourniquet tightens. Time, place, object. December 23rd. Bastogne. A German ambulance. Because in the next hour, a U.S. Army medic is going to do something so stupid it circles back around into brilliance. He's going to steal that ambulance, drive it through enemy-held roads in a snowstorm, raid a field station for medicine, and then drive back, while Germans try to stop him, and Americans try to shoot him. Not to become a hero, to keep 27 men from dying quietly in a cellar. This is a WWII story about the most dangerous kind of courage. The kind that looks like problem-solving under a gun. The man who learned to move before he learned to fight. Henry Alvarez was born May 4, 1918 in the Bronx. Brick buildings, alleyways, and the kind of neighborhoods that teach you 2 skills early: how to read people fast and how to carry someone when they can't carry themselves. His father worked dock shifts. His mother cleaned houses. Henry was the oldest kid, which meant he learned responsibility the way most people learn math, by being thrown into it. By 17, he was volunteering as an ambulance attendant in the city, riding calls in winter storms, hauling strangers down narrow staircases, learning how to keep your hands steady while someone else's world falls apart. He wasn't fearless, he was practical. He learned that panic is contagious, and calm can be too. When the army came, the recruiter looked at Henry's background and said the word that shaped his war: medic.
Henry didn't argue. He didn't want to kill for a living. He wanted to keep people from dying. That's what he told himself on the ship to England. That's what he told himself in training. That's what he told himself when Normandy happened and the world stopped being theory. Because in combat, being a medic means something most men never fully understand until they watch it happen. You run toward what everyone else is trained to avoid. Not once, not when you feel brave, over and over, until it becomes your identity.
Why Bastogne was different. By December 1944, the war in Europe felt like it was ending. Paris was free, the Allies were pushing toward Germany, people were whispering about Christmas at home. And then the Germans hit back. A surprise offensive through the Ardennes. Snow, forest, bad roads, bad visibility. The perfect environment for an army that needed one last miracle. Bastogne became the knot in the rope. Roads mattered. Bastogne was roads. Hold the town and you choke German movement. Lose it and you open a corridor. The Americans inside Bastogne were cold, tired, and short on everything. Ammo, food, fuel, and medical supplies. That last one is invisible until it isn't. A rifle without ammo is still a rifle. A tank without fuel is still a tank. But a wounded man without antibiotics becomes a clock you can't reset. And Doc Alvarez was watching that clock tick. Back to the farmhouse. The wounded in the cellar weren't dramatic about it. Most of them were trying to be quiet, because quiet is a kind of dignity. But Doc could see the signs. A guy with a leg wound that looked okay an hour ago, now shivering. A man with a belly bandage whose skin felt too hot under the cloth. A kid with a shoulder hit, breathing faster than he should. Doc knew that pattern. In the Bronx, infection meant a fever and a hospital. Here, infection meant a name carved into a temporary marker. Doc checked his last vial of morphine. He hesitated. Then he put it back. Pain you can fight. Sepsis doesn't care how tough you are. Someone above him, somewhere in the dark, was making decisions about ammo and artillery. Doc realized no one was making decisions about penicillin fast enough, so he made one himself. He looked at the men in the cellar and said the only kind of promise a medic can make. "I'm coming back." Then he stepped into the snow. The ambulance. The German ambulance sat there like a dare. Doc approached it slowly, pistol in hand. Not because he thought he could win a gunfight, but because carrying a pistol makes you feel slightly less like prey. He circled the vehicle. No driver, no guard, no voices. Just an engine idling in the cold, the exhaust drifting like breath. Doc climbed in. The interior smelled like disinfectant and smoke. The dash was labeled in German. He couldn't read a word. But he didn't need to read words. Every vehicle has the same religion. Key, clutch, gear, gas. His hands found the basics. He eased it into motion and rolled out of the yard like he belonged. At the edge of the property, he stopped. Because this was the moment where the whole plan could collapse. If a German patrol saw him and decided to check. If an American sentry saw the Red Cross and decided it was a trick. If anyone asked one question he couldn't answer in German, Doc Alvarez would be dead in the driver's seat. He breathed once. Then he drove. The road that wanted him dead. The Ardennes at night isn't a battlefield, it's a maze. Snow ate the landmarks, fog turned headlights into halos, shell holes filled with black water, trees became walls.
Doc kept the ambulance slow. Too fast and he'd slide into a ditch. Too slow and he'd get stopped. He passed a cluster of German infantry at a crossroads. They glanced at the ambulance and waved him through. Not because they were kind, because the Red Cross suggested paperwork, and tired soldiers avoid paperwork the way they avoid death. Doc's heart hammered anyway. He held the wheel with both hands and kept his face blank. Then the road dipped into a stretch of forest, and the feeling changed. The air grew still. Doc saw movement between trees. A shape stepped out. A rifle, a flashlight beam, a German checkpoint. Doc's brain did the thing it always did. No panic, just options. Option 1, stop and hope. Option 2, run and pray. He chose option 2. He hit the gas. The ambulance surged forward. The flashlight beam jerked. A shout cut through the night. Gunfire cracked behind him, wild, rushed, inaccurate. Doc didn't look back. Looking back is how you die in a moving vehicle. The ambulance fishtailed once, tires grabbing ice, and then it straightened out and kept going. Doc's hands were white on the wheel. He wasn't thinking about bravery. He was thinking about the cellar. 27. That number stayed in his head like a drumbeat.
The field station. Doc needed one thing: medicine. Not just bandages, not gauze, penicillin. In Bastogne, the closest supply point was chaos. But Doc remembered something from a wounded German he'd treated earlier. A small aid station in a village 2 miles east, German-controlled for the moment, set up in a schoolhouse. If Doc could get inside for 60 seconds, he could save lives. He rolled into the village at 3:22 a.m. Snow covered everything like a blanket over a body. The schoolhouse was there. Dark windows, a faint light behind one curtain. 2 German soldiers stood near the door, stamping their feet for warmth. Doc slowed the ambulance and angled it like it had a reason to be here. He didn't turn the engine off. He couldn't afford not to. He grabbed his medic armband. Then he froze. It was American, useless here. So he did something that would have gotten him court-martialed in daylight and praised in hindsight. He took a German Red Cross cloth from the ambulance interior, something meant for stretchers, and wrapped it around his arm like a crude band. He stepped out into the snow and walked toward the door with the posture of a man who belongs. The guards looked at him. Doc nodded. He didn't speak, because speaking is where languages betray you. He lifted a hand and pointed toward the ambulance, then toward the building, universal gesture for help. One guard frowned. The other shrugged. They opened the door. Doc walked in. For a moment, the warm air hit his face and it felt like another planet. Inside, the schoolhouse smelled like iodine, sweat, and wet wool. There were cots. There were wounded Germans. A nurse looked up, suspicious. Doc didn't stop. He moved like he owned the place, straight to the supply cabinet. He yanked it open. Bottles, boxes, labels in German. He didn't read them. He recognized the shapes. Penicillin came in a certain kind of vial, a certain kind of packaging. He grabbed everything that looked right. Then he saw it. A wooden crate half open on the floor, fresh supplies, newly delivered. Inside, more vials, more sulfa, more morphine. Doc scooped it up like a thief in a church. A voice behind him snapped in German. Doc turned. A German medic, older, mustachied, was staring at him with that slow, dawning certainty. This man is not ours. Doc's stomach dropped. Because the German medic didn't raise a rifle, he raised his voice. He started shouting, and in war, shouting is an alarm. Doc didn't argue. He ran. Doc hit the snow outside, slammed the ambulance door, and threw the crate onto the passenger seat. He didn't sit down carefully.
He dropped into the seat like gravity was trying to kill him. He jammed the gear. The ambulance lurched. A German soldier reached the road and fired. A bullet punched a hole through the side panel. Doc felt the impact as a thud, not pain. Another shot cracked the windshield, spiderwebbing glass. Doc ducked without thinking and kept driving. The village fell behind him. The forest returned. So did the fog. Doc had stolen medicine. Now he had to survive the trip home. And home right now was a cellar full of men who didn't know the world had just tilted in their favor.
The worst part, friendly fire. Doc found the American perimeter the way you find anything in fog, by accident. A glow, a silhouette of sandbags, a shouted challenge in English. He felt relief, actual relief flare in his chest. Then he saw the rifles raise. Then he saw the muzzle flashes. Because from their perspective, this was a German ambulance approaching at night. In the Bulge, tricks were everywhere. Doc slammed on the horn. He leaned out the window and waved his bare arm until it went numb. He screamed until his throat tore. "Medic, American, don't shoot!" Gunfire doesn't stop because of yelling. It stops when the shooter believes you. And belief takes seconds you might not have. Rounds snapped past the hood. Doc made a decision as pure as it was suicidal. He drove closer. He brought the ambulance right up to the sandbags and hit the brakes hard. The vehicle skidded sideways and stopped. Silence. Half a second. Then boots in snow. A lieutenant appeared, pistol up, shouting. Doc threw the door open with both hands raised. "Penicillin," he yelled. "I have penicillin." The lieutenant blinked. It wasn't the sentence he expected. It was the sentence that made the whole situation make sense. Men swarmed the ambulance. Someone grabbed the crate and popped it open. Someone else laughed, one sharp, disbelieving bark. Because inside were vials like treasure. Not gold, not trophies. Medicine. The lieutenant stared at Doc like he'd crawled out of a myth. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Doc didn't give a speech. He just pointed back into the fog. "Borrowed it," he said. "We're out." The cellar, again. Back at the farmhouse, the wounded didn't cheer. They didn't have the energy. But Doc watched their faces change when the first injections went in. A man who'd been fading, steadied. A kid who'd been sweating, breathed easier. A soldier who'd been staring through people, blinked and focused again. Not miracles, just the war's version of mercy. Doc sat on the cellar steps and let his hands shake. Because the truth is, he hadn't been brave the whole time. He'd been terrified. But he'd been terrified and moving. And that is the difference between a good plan and a good outcome. Someone later counted the supplies. Enough penicillin and sulfa to treat dozens more, not just those 27. Enough morphine to make the next day survivable. Doc Alvarez didn't end the Battle of the Bulge. He didn't win a town, but he changed the shape of a small corner of the war. And if you've ever watched someone die from infection when you know it was preventable, you understand that small corner is everything.
Aftermath. The ambulance didn't last long. By morning, German artillery found the farmhouse yard and turned the stolen vehicle into scrap. But the medicine was already inside, already working, already doing the quiet job that bullets can't. Doc Alvarez was recommended for a medal. He didn't care which one. He didn't want a ribbon. He wanted resupply. He wanted enough antibiotics that he never had to make that choice again. After the war, Doc went home and became what he was always becoming: an ambulance man, a paramedic before the word was common. He worked nights, he worked storms, he carried strangers downstairs. And sometimes, when someone asked him about the war, he didn't talk about battles. He talked about a cellar, about a number, 27. He talked about the moment when the safe choice would have been to do nothing. And he did something anyway.
What this story is really about. There are heroic war stories that sound like thunder. This isn't one of those. This story is about a man with no authority, no backup, and no guarantee of survival, who looked at an impossible problem and treated it like an emergency call. Time, place, object. December 23rd, Bastogne, a German ambulance. He didn't steal it to become famous. He stole it because in that moment, the difference between life and death was measured in vials. And he refused to let paperwork, weather, and enemy lines decide the outcome for the men in his care. Because that's what medics do when they're the best kind. They don't fight wars. They fight the part of war that happens after the gunfire. And sometimes, the only way to do that is to steal an engine and drive straight into the dark.